And
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because the medicine that they use is they'll have like Western medicine, but then they'll also
Yeah.
have Chinese medicine.
Mm.
So you never quite really know what you get. And sometimes, when I first moved to China, I mean, within like 2 or 3 days, I they fed me some noodles at the training center,
Yeah.
and these noodles are they're called spicy noodles, and so I ate these noodles, and I was like, wow, they're really spicy. I was sweating and everything, but my body was like, We cannot handle these noodles," and and the um, I had like a 4 or 5 degree temperature, and I was out for the count for like 3 or 4 days. I was just like in the bed
From
sweating it out,
spicy noodles.
all because of the noodles were just so spicy. So it's like when they say you have culture shock, it's like it's a culture shock, but it's also an immune system shock.
Mm.
So
So when
you
did you
know
end up moving to China for that role?
I moved here in January 2024,
Okay,
just
been a
before
couple
the
of years.
Paris Olympics. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah,
And
because
did you
I was
were you preparing the team for that Paris Olympics too?
that's right. That's why I was hired.
Gotcha. Perfect. No, this
Yeah,
will be good to go through. So I've got a few, well, more questions will come up as we go through it because I just wanted to kind of chat through a bunch of different things. But I think a good place to start would
yeah,
be scheduling, or I guess the scheduling differences, or at least maybe year, the year long competition differences between, I guess most people, when they think of wrestling, they maybe think of like collegiate wrestling in the USA versus maybe what's
yeah.
happening on the international circuit there. So it'd be interesting to kind of get your expertise into kind of how those differ.
Well, yeah, that's a good question. So how is it different between collegiate and the international circuit? Well, there's a couple differences. The first one that I got to think of, if you're going to do a periodization calendar, you try to find the biggest competition and you work your way back. And so in collegiate, the NCAA's are usually in March or April, and so in the NCAA's being the biggest tournament for the collegiate team, they will usually peak around that time, and then they have the opportunity to go to the U.S. Open, which is in April or May, and sometimes it changes. Sometimes it changes. The NCAA tournament will be a little bit before the U.S. Open, but typically this is the situation. And I think it's actually maybe in April, but I don't know. It's been a little while since I've been back stateside. And and on the international circuit, we've got the most important tournament of the year is the World Championships, which is typically in October, September, October. This year it's different. Actually, it's in November, the end of October and November, because we have the Asian Games shortly after. And so our season is planned around the Asian Championships, the Asian Championships, the World Championships, and the Asian Games. And so those are like the big fundamental differences in terms of how the periodization is oriented around the major competitions. Um, but one thing that's so really different about international versus collegiate is in collegiate, they have matches almost every month. Um, they'll either have a tournament or they'll have dual meets, and they're usually condensed. Um, November is when the season will like officially start, and then they'll have like dual meets throughout the year, leading up to the NCAA's, where they'll have the Big Tens, which is about 2 weeks before, and then they'll have the NCAA's. And there's a few tournaments that are like in the mix, but generally it's mostly dual meets and a few tournaments. And some of the college wrestlers will be going to international tournaments if they're interested in like having a freestyle career as well. Um, so it's common for guys to mix it up. Like for example, Kyle Snyder was doing this at the time when he was training at the Olympic Center, and so this is like right before he went to like Ohio State. he was going out and doing these international tournaments, and then also at the same time because he just won his Olympic medal when he was like 18 or so, 19. And so then he was like going into college at that time. So, and so the fact that they have these matches that are interspersed throughout the training year, this changes a lot of how the training year is planned when it comes to how they're trying to peak for different tournaments and how they're trying to develop their training plan. Um,
Yeah, nice.
there are,
I was gonna say for you then, how does how does that influence maybe your programming at a, I guess, at a macro level? Whereas you mentioned collegiate, I mean, I think some of them almost wrestle every week as well, potentially, depending on,
yeah, they
yeah.
can.
So yeah, so how does that then change maybe how you, I guess, macro view program
Mm,
in that setting versus what you have now, where I'm assuming they still have some matches, but it's mainly just centered around the big one, two, or three competitions a year.
yes. I mean, the biggest component of all this, the biggest training consideration for all this is the weight, because these wrestlers, they have to get down to weight multiple times, maybe a month. And as you know, that's like, you're taking energy away from your system, which is going to be taken away from adaptation. And so when you have these tournaments and you have these competitions and you got to bring yourself down to weight, that's a big stress on the organism. And so when you have these competitions, managing your weight and managing your training load is super important because it allows you to you want to make sure that you have enough in the tank to make it through the entire season before breaking down.
So does that mean, I guess, does that mean then almost like in season for a collegiate wrestler, like
Yeah,
you're just having to manage, you're just having to manage the minimum amount of volume as possible, just to kind of keep everything ticking over and getting through. Whereas in your current setting, you have a little more room to move to kind of maybe push some of the physical qualities a little harder.
for sure, definitely. I mean, there's two big differences. One of them is that in the college there's an off season. And so during that off season, the collegiate athletes can take the time to really build their physical qualities, whether it's put on their muscle, whether it's build their maximum strength and do all these things. And then in season, they're uh, really trying to manage that volume and that intensity to make sure that they're able to maintain those qualities through the year. And it's
Mhm.
possible for athletes to
Mm.
improve and to
Yeah,
gain strength and
similar to
power and
rugby, I
speed and
guess,
all
in a
those things.
sense, how it's kind of set out.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's possible to. It's just a lot different where in international circuit the competitions are much fewer and far between. And so we can also have a much more dedicated training phases, where we like, have the first half of the year leading up to the continental championships and the second half of the year leading up to the world championships. And this allows for, you know, solid periodization throughout the course of the year.
So how do you typically like to, I guess, periodize? I mean, that's a nice 6 month almost block you get to kind of
Yeah.
really dial in there. So how does that generally look? And we can dive into more detail as we kind of go through it.
Gosh. So, I mean, the first thing is that, with the periodization, you got to look at the tournament, like where is it, when is it going to be, and how much how much time do you have to get there. And so, working back from there, you want to have your three phases: your general physical prep, your specific physical prep, and your pre-competition prep. And those are your three main big blocks. And within those, the secret sauce is within how you lead them to each other and allow them to kind of like allow them to create momentum into your competition. And this is, I think, the art form of really coaching. And so in the general physical preparation, there's a lot of there are some wrestling strength books and things like this that say, you should focus on building maximum strength during this time. You should focus on building building your base in this way. And during this time, this is when I like to just build up the foundation of the athlete, and how much work capacity can we create at this moment. And so this work capacity is going to enable for an athlete to kind of feed into the rest of the year, while uh, while having a good base that'll enable them to continue training hard. And so this general physical prep is really enabling you to build that base to lead into the heavier training that's coming into the phases to come. And it's a dance, because as you during this period, you have to figure out what are the other things that you want to do with your wrestling and your conditioning. And a lot of those adaptations are conflicting, and they interfere. And while there is, like, there is some evidence that shows that the interference effect is minimal. Yeah, it's minimal, but the body will still partition its energy onto the qualities that it finds to be the most stressful, and then the other ones won't reap the same benefit. And so it's important to manage the training in such a way that there's an effective balance between what is it between what are the qualities you're going for, how are they laid out, and how are the athletes adapting to this training.
So what does this kind of base work consist of then? Is it just almost like a little more volume in the gym on your basic compound lifts and maybe some, I guess, lower intensity aerobic work for the conditioning? Is that what your class is, your base work, or are you doing something completely
Yes.
different?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a lot of, I mean, you, you know, you're trying to bodybuild, but without actually doing the methods of bodybuilding. You're
Yeah.
like you're trying to build as much muscle, and you're trying to build as much tissue onto the organism at this time, because over the course of the season they're going to lose some of that. And so, I mean, it's gone. There's been some studies that have been shown that have as an athlete goes starts the season and then goes towards the end of the season, their hormones start to take a decline, and their lean body mass will actually decline in conjunction with these hormonal changes. And so it's important to lay a foundation of tissue that can carry the athlete through the season. And so this is one of the uh, a priori um, a priori uh, goals during this time. And
Got it.
um, and I mean, most importantly, is also determining what your strategy is for the whole year. I mean, these phases, they can really differ depending on the strategy that you have for that year, because of course you have your needs analysis, which determines, okay, what are our athletes going to be doing this year, where do we need to work, and what are our strengths and our weaknesses during this time. And that way we can actually prioritize and determine what are the things that need to be worked at this time, so that way we're not pulling the horse to two different buckets of water. And this is what I was talking about in terms of, like, the body will
Mm.
compete resources for conflicting adaptations. So this is where it gets important to find a way to either find ways to compound these adaptations or prevent them from interfering.
Nice. I've actually got some questions in the live chat here for you that will go well into
There's
some
a
other
live
questions, Dave. Yeah, yeah,
there's some live there's a live chat.
I got a live chat here on YouTube. People like to
Oh, cool.
people like to jump in and pick your brain on the stuff. There's actually really good questions that'll lead me into some other ones,
Sure,
but this one by
sure.
Shot by 3 BDU. How does an Olympic wrestler weekly schedule look, and how many live wrestling sessions are they getting, and how many S&C, etc.?
Wow. Um, I can you can if you want to specify a country, I can tell you. It's this is one of the I think I'm very lucky in this regard, because I wrestled for Team USA for about 10 to 12 years, and during this time, got to wrestle on the international circuit, and I wasted all my money living in other countries, training with all the other nations, and so I got to see how their schedules differed and also were the same. But I'll tell you how Team USA was. I can't really disclose what China's doing, but I can tell you what Team USA
Mhm.
was doing. Um, so what we did is we had on Monday and Tuesday, Monday morning and Monday afternoon would actually, I should preface this by saying it changed in each phase. So during our general physical preparation phase, our specific physical preparation phase, our pre-competitive phase, and our competition phase, they always changed. So
Mhm.
this is something that's to be that's different. Like for example, and back in the US, we would have in our general prep phase, we would even have weeks of like 4 strength training sessions per week, and then it would go into 3, and then to 2, and then 1, and that was like that would happen. And then sometimes it was just 3-2-1, or 3-2-2, or 3-3-3, or 2-2-2 all year round. I seen it all, and but it generally was Monday morning, Monday afternoon, wrestling. Tuesday morning, wrestling. Tuesday afternoon, strength training. Wednesday morning, conditioning. Thursday morning, wrestling. Thursday afternoon, wrestling. Friday morning, wrestling. Friday afternoon, uh, strength training. And Saturday morning, we would run the mountain. In Colorado Springs, we had this thing called
Ooh.
the incline, which I think is, in my opinion, it's one of the greatest training tools ever. It's like this old railroad track that would go up the mountain, and it was
That's by the Garden of the Gods, is it?
that's right.
Yeah,
That's
I've
right.
seen it. I've seen it.
Yeah, and it's awesome because no matter how good of shape you were in, it's always hard. And so it's like, and it took me like if you're in really good shape, you can do it in under 40 minutes. And if you're in like phenomenal shape, like if your VO2 max is like pushing over 55, then you can get under 30 minutes. And or even less. I had my VO2 max measured at like 63, and I could like, and it took me 10 years to get under 30 minutes. It is just like it's a mental grind. It's just like uh I don't even know how to explain, but I think it's like one of the best training tools mentally, physically. I mean, you're just like in your lactate threshold beyond your lactate threshold the whole time. And you're beyond your lactate threshold the whole time, and then you're like,
And
and the
altitude.
altitude gets higher, so you climb up 2000, 3000, about 2300 feet, and you start at 7, so you're already like at altitude, and then you get higher. Yeah, it was one of my favorite things. But
That's
anyways, I digress from his question. We would live wrestle pretty much in every practice. um, but the structure of the structure of that live wrestling would change. So, for example, Monday would be like positional training in the morning, and then with like some sort of fancy system of managing time, like a pyramid: 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 3 sets, something like this. And then the afternoon would just be like 3 minute goes, 30 seconds rest, 3 minute goes, 30 seconds rest for X number of goes. And then on Friday, we would do, actually, we used to do this thing when I first got to Colorado Springs. On Fridays, we would have what's called a grind match. And then on Friday morning, Friday afternoon, we would just have a 60-minute match. You would just like grab somebody, they would press the timer, and then you would just go for 60 minutes. And it was just all for mental, it was like all for mental toughness. And it was cool. I mean, it was challenging. And I think it has its values, but my philosophy about using time to modulate your energy systems has significantly changed. But there really is something beautiful in using things like this to test your willpower and test your mind,
Mm,
and meditate, so to speak, during these sort of things.
nice.
Um, so that was generally Friday would be matches. Thursday and Monday were usually the hardest days, and especially because like you're starting to accumulate fatigue um, through the week, and like it's not like the conditioning was easy, even though Wednesday morning was like it was not it was only half day. They're
Yeah.
like, oh, it's a recovery day. It's like, yeah, hardly. By the time you came in on Thursday morning, by the time you came on Thursday, you already felt like you were dead. And it was just like 10 years, always tired, always tired. I don't, there was like never a time where I feel like I was getting ahead of the where I really feel like I was getting ahead of the fatigue that was coming on. And
Knowing
so
what you
this
know now,
was
would you change how that training is structured?
I would have just ate more.
Yeah.
I would have just, I mean, the training, I think a lot of the times we get caught up in these little details about, when is the best time to train, what is the best order of training, and how do we optimize how we do our training. And our body is so adept at adapting
Mm.
that it will adapt to whatever you throw at it. Now you have to be careful, because if you are throwing the wrong things at it, it will adapt in the wrong ways. But generally speaking, unless you're like quite negligent, you'll be moving in the right direction so long as you're pushing your cardio, or you're pushing the correct qualities that you're trying to go for.
Mm.
The biggest thing I see people that are guilty of is they're doing something and they're thinking it's going to have a training effect, but it really doesn't have the intended training effect.
What would be some examples
And
of that?
um uh for example, like we see people trying to do like let me think of something. Okay, like
Yep.
for example, when people try to like grab like do a wrestling move that's like weighted in some way, and
Yeah.
they're like, okay, I'm gonna do like this move with a weight, and like think that that's gonna help me transfer into my
Like skill
wrestling.
work. Yeah.
That's not really how it works. Like our bodies are super keen in how we adapt specifically to specific outcomes, specific scenarios, the balance, the feel, the timing. You're on a wrestling mat, which is another thing. The
Mm.
person has a certain weight balance,
Yeah.
it's this is like another example. Or even like, people are doing like the punching. Uh, People are doing the punching with the weights.
Yeah.
Um, I think even I think even landmine training is kind of like one of these things. I really like landmine training, but we talk about it like it's rotational training, and there is like a rotational component to it, like, but it's more like unilateral training, which
Mm.
the body does express its force through these like diagonal patterns. But like, to think that it's like doing this like direct fascial pattern across your whole body is like, dude, our whole body is working the whole time.
Yep.
Muscles are co-contracting across the entire body, all the way from your toe to the hand that's holding the to your hand that's holding the weight. It's more or less a full body exercise. And in order for one to like really build rotational strength, it's got to be more or less focused on developing uh it's got to be resisting force directly in a rotational component. But like when we're doing the landmine stuff, it's actually more or less close to your center.
I know exactly
And
what
so
system you're talking about, and yes, I am with you. I do not like. I do not
you
like
don't
that. That
yeah,
I won't name the name, but yeah, I don't like. I
yeah.
don't like it either. Put it that way.
I mean, I personally, I love landmine training. It's like a
Yeah,
staple in my
I do enjoy
stuff.
it. But there's a
but
system of landmine training that has been created. Put it that way.
yeah, I mean, it's land like it's there is no one exercise that covers it all.
Yeah.
And because our body doesn't care, our body is just a sequence of muscles, and our body is a sequence of muscles which is working together to oppose and create force.
Mhm.
And so when you weight train your muscles, or when you're strength training, you're essentially training those muscles to create force. And the movement pattern is more or less the skill of it. But so you're developing a skill, and then you're developing capacity. And there is a synergy between the two, which is important. Which, the sum is greater than the parts. But ultimately, when we're strength training, we're focusing on trying to build this capacity. And then when we go onto the wrestling mat, then the athlete has this capacity, and now it's their responsibility to train in a way that they utilize this capacity in their wrestling. And this is actually, I think what kind of initially piqued my interest about what your posts were about, because you were using a lot of physics in order
Mm,
to talk about, what should we be focusing on. And I love this sort of stuff. I read a book in 2013 called like Fight Physics, or like got it was like Fight Stats or Fight Physics. It was at
mm,
my friend Brian Caraway's house. And this book um, was all about the statistics of UFC fights, and how you could essentially play Moneyball with the with the fight. God, what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry, I'm still like a little.
no,
I'm
you're
still
good.
like running on like 3 hours of sleep for like 2 weeks. Um, uh,
Like outcomes? Like
take No, like
statistics?
taking the statistics of like,
Yeah.
okay, if you land this many punches, if you take this many hits, what is the probability of you winning?
Yeah.
And it was talking about these statistics, but then on the end, it kind of went into like, then it started. This piqued my interest. I was like, I wonder how much of this all is like really like, I would like to wish that all of this was like really mathematical. And so then this helped me. I started looking into it a little bit more, and then there's another book. Uh, when I get back to the US, I'll send you a picture of it. But
Yes.
it's essentially it is called Fight Physics, or the physics of fighting, where it's essentially where he's talking about how, like, why is it that a spinning back kick is higher
Okay.
than a front kick. And it's talking about like the angular momentum of a kick is higher
Yeah.
as the foot is further away from the body. And then, just like a figure skate, or just like a gymnast, when they open their arms, they slow down, they bring their arms in, they speed up. It was talking about all of these sort of things. And so I was like trying to use this to like really think about what is transferring in our training, how
Mm,
and what am I missing here. If if uh if strength, as we like to look at it, is force times mass. Force is mass and acceleration. Then, like, how do we train these components to give the desired effect? And in a sense, like, all three of those components are individually trainable. Force is like the capacity of a muscle, the mass is like the size of the organism, and the acceleration is the rate of change for your speed. And so I started to think about these things, and how does this relate to our transfer? And why is it that some people have this wrestling strength, but other people don't?
mm,
And I think a lot of it has to do with this situation, where people, when they're wrestling, they know how to use their force against something
mhm.
in a way to get it to move, or they know how to use their body to create force, which is the mass component of the situation. Like, if you've ever wrestled with, there's a famous wrestler named Dan Gable, and
Mhm.
he was really. I was like fortunate enough to meet him in Iowa and learn a couple of things from him. And one of the things that really was what was evident about how he wrestled is that he would put his whole weight into his hand. And so his hand is grip, his arm might be strong, but that's not what you felt. What you felt was his whole body. And so uh this is like wrestling strength, and how does it transfer? And so, when we're in the weight room, essentially we're trying to build this capacity to create no leakages in the system, so that way that energy can transfer from our
Mhm.
feet to our hands.
That's a good answer too. And I've actually had questions pour in for you. So you're obviously a superstar here. And what's nice
That's
is
cool.
they I've got some educated followers, put it that way. So there's some really cool questions.
That's
What are the,
cool.
some of them actually ones that I already had for you. So I'm going to run through these. So
Yeah, I'm down. Let's
yeah,
go.
let's go. Christian says, what do the Chinese use for developing rate of force development, and how important is peak force versus rate of force development?
So I can't tell you what we do in China, but I can tell you. How do you develop peak force and how do you develop rate of force development.
Or which one, or
Um,
is one more important than the other to you at all? Does it depend on the athlete, or I don't know, maybe the style?
okay, yes, this is really important. So this comes down to strategy. So, Christian, I'm sorry to like take kind of like a backhanded answer, but like never, nothing is ever black and white, especially in wrestling, because like this is like my shtick of wrestling. Wrestling is a game of rock, paper, scissors. You've got you've got your quick athletes, you've got your conditioned athletes, and you got your strong athletes. And it's a game of rock, paper, scissors, because essentially the fast guy, he can if he can move more quickly than the strong guy, then the strength is ineffective. The strong guy can neutralize the quick guy, he's not effective. And the conditioned guy, if he can outlast the other two, he's also more effective. And so there's never ever a total advantage.
Mm,
Um, because also if you can get people to wrestle your match, then this is essentially how you tactically win a match. So I use like a lot of like idioms and stuff. I'm really big on communications, and I have like a whole system based on how you actually communicate your strategy to your coaches and your athletes, so that way you can like be aligned on a specific system. I call it the snap, um, because of well, wrestling snaps. But having your strategy is super important, because there is no best way to win. There's only the best way for you to win. And so whether it's peak force or rate of force development, the first thing is you got to make sure is that you don't have any holes in how you're going to lose. Because it's one thing to have your strengths, because your strengths is how you're going to win, but your weaknesses is how you're going to lose. And so if you don't have these covered, then you're going to be exposed, and before you even have the opportunity to win, you're going to lose. And so rate of force development, essentially most athletic actions happen within 200 to 300 milliseconds. So rate of force development needs to occur within this window of time. And what's tricky about wrestling is that there's actually kind of an asterisk there, because what you're doing is you're essentially trying to time people, and you're trying to use your leverages and your movements and your fakes to essentially shorten that window or deceive them. So that way you can actually have a shorter window, so that way they can't even react to the move, because you're already one step ahead or two steps ahead or three steps ahead. And so this is like one of those situations. For example, Jordan Burroughs, he hits his fakes, he's faking, he's faking, he's faking, he's faking. And the athlete will he will fake, the athlete will get on their heels, and then he'll shoot. And so the athlete is now responding to two different things. So that's 200 milliseconds, that's 400 milliseconds. Jordan Burroughs hit his double leg in 250 milliseconds or 300 milliseconds. That 100 milliseconds difference is all it takes to score. And so that rate of force of development is important because of the strategy. How do you score your points, or what is your technical capacity, and like what are the moves that you like to use? If you like, for example, if you hit your 2-on-1s and you're doing your 2-on-1 attacks and you're mostly holding a tie, then rate of force development isn't as important uh, until you hit your throw. But then at that point, timing and weight balance are still important. Like this is judo, right? And your balance. Now, peak force, this is essentially like when you hit your move, how much of that energy carries to or through your opponent, which is kind of like what you were posting about the other day, where you're talking about where you're talking about momentum and impulse,
Mm-hmm.
where you essentially have an athlete, you know, your mass is going to stay constant, their mass is going to stay constant, but you have the opportunity, to take your mass, hit it at a speed, and carry it through and use your force to carry it through them. And so, but that amount of force needs to change. So the capacity for you to create enough force is enough to change their momentum, which is the impulse. And so you need to create enough force quickly enough, which is the rate of force development, in order to get them off their balance, or to change their center of gravity, or execute your attack, whatever. So this is like the scientific answer to like that question. What I would like to say, generally speaking, is that rate of force development and power and force strength are both extremely important, and they feed into each other. Like, your strength is what helps you build your power, and your power is a function of your strength. And so you really want to build up your strength, so that way you have the capacity to express your power. But you have to train your power separately, so that way you can express your strength. And if you're just working on your strength, also, this is not really great to do indefinitely, because your body is going to adapt to that type of muscle action, the speed of movement, the exercises that you're doing. And this is how injuries occur, is that when you're doing one type of training for way too long, and then your body just adapts and normalizes to that type of training, and without enough variation to how do you say, to redistribute the stress. Um, so this is important. Rate of force development is even more, is the force is, can the body even protect itself, and rate of force development, can the body protect itself quick enough. This is also another component when it comes to like ACL tears and stuff, is that like a lot of the times people will have an ACL tear, and then they will get back to playing, they'll be all good to go, and then they'll do like a jump on a force plate, and they'll notice that the ACL leg can actually not produce its force within 250, 300 milliseconds. And we were just talking about, if all actions happen within 250, 300 milliseconds, and this whole leg is behind, well, then the body is moving and the legs stay behind here. So what happens? Retorn ACL. And so this is like why people that tear those tend to re-tear them, because their rate of force development doesn't catch up to this. Generally speaking, strength is king, but rate of force development allows you to use your strength in a way to execute your techniques. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that answers. I've got two follow-ups for you, and they're two separate ones, but I'm gonna throw them both at you, and I'll come back to it if we forget one. One is around rate of force development. So you
Okay.
could say that kind of 250 to 300 milliseconds is almost like late stage rate of force development. Then obviously you have like really early stage, like 50 to 100 milliseconds, which would be like more of your quick response, I guess, plyometrics and jumps and whatnot.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, quick response plyos and whatnot. So
Yeah.
do you have like, do you specifically, how would I frame this? Is that okay? Is early stage rate of force development something that you do focus on, even though it is, I guess, more contextual, let's just say, to say sprinting as an example? We have these really short ground contacts. And then my second question, which is
Yeah.
kind of not related, but kind of is, so we'll come back to it. You mentioned obviously the different, I guess,
Yeah.
types of wrestlers that you put together, like finishing ones, fast ones, or strong ones. Do you categorize your wrestlers in that way? And then they, I guess, maybe program separate or slightly differently based on their characteristics?
Yes. The answer to that question is yes, definitely have to individualize training, because people, I mean, so there's three there was three things I forgot. The second one. The first one was actually, did I forget all
First one
three
was
of them?
on early versus late stage rate of force development and
Oh,
using like quick response,
all right.
say plyometrics versus longer ground contact jumps or Olympic weightlifting derivatives.
Okay, I love Olympic weightlifting derivatives. They're super applicable for wrestling. Just the speed to get under the bar is important. The ability to catch the bar is important. The ability to develop force into it. If you're a Greco-Roman wrestler, you're training all of the applicable muscles for your lifts. In freestyle, it's not as much, but you can turn it into a split. But you can turn it into a split
Mm.
clean or something like that, and then you have a little bit more of a direct um, direct carryover. But I have seen Olympic weightlifting carry over into power development. So it's doing what I need it to do for the athletes in terms of keeping them loaded, doing an exercise that they're familiar with, and helping them develop the qualities that I need. Plyometrics is kind of interesting. I have plyometrics are super important in the training just for to train, like you said, early stage rate of force development. I have some funny thoughts about this that I am looking to investigate at another period of my career. But essentially, that I wonder if those don't even exist on a wrestling mat because the
Mm.
mat will
That's kind of
actually,
why I asked the question as well, because it's like where it may be more contextual to something like sprinting versus wrestling. But yeah, carry on.
yeah. I mean, what's important is that the wrestling mat kind of acts like a tendon because you store energy. Like athletes train to use the mat as like part of their body.
Mm.
So it's almost like that's part of their tendon, and they have to learn how to use that. And so I would be curious to know how is the actual wrestling mat. Oh, I gotta plug this guy in really quick. How
No,
is
all
the
good.
wrestling mat? Let me do this. How does the wrestling mat affect the development of that force with respect to the? There we go. How is wrestling mat going to affect the timing of that development, and how is the energy going to be re-expressed or either you or how's it just going to change with respect to using the wrestling mat? Is
Mm.
it going to prevent the utilization of more force? Is it going to facilitate the utilization of more force? I mean, you see gymnasts launch themselves on those pads, and they're certainly creating a lot of force, but I don't think it's the same amount like when they're sprinting. And I noticed this in wrestlers who run on the mat.
Oh, you still there? I think where you moved your internet.
And I think it
Yeah, I got you back now.
on the mat
Oh,
versus.
nope.
Hold on, sorry, it just cut out for a second.
Yeah, I think you're back now. I think where you
We
moved
back?
the
Can you hear
internet.
me?
Yeah, the internet isn't as good where you moved.
Yeah. Welcome to China.
It's
Um, the
working now. It's working now.
God, the internet in these rooms is like the bane of my existence. It's suboptimal. Like at certain times of day, like everybody's on their phones and stuff, and
Mm. It's working now. We got you back.
and yeah, everybody's waking up at this point. So
Yep.
we'll see how it goes.
So,
Um,
let me.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, you
So I mean, the early rate early rate of force development is important. The skill you need to develop your skill.
go. Oh man, you're breaking up again.
This is not the. Yeah, I see that.
Does your cord reach your old seat?
What the heck, dude? It does not.
Mm.
But let's see if I can kind of. Maybe I can try. Let's see here. Let's see how far does this cord go. Actually, it might. Let me try this. I didn't realize that's interesting how that one spot of the. All right. Dun, 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 dun. All right, let's see. Let's try this.
Oh
All
yeah.
right, can you
Yeah,
look at
I got
now I'm
you.
like a boomer.
It works.
No.
It works. As long as it's
Is it
working.
working? Is it all
Yeah,
right?
it's working right now. It's working right now.
Now I'm a boomer on this whole. um,
Perfect. Perfect. It means you have more
actually,
wisdom.
boomers are like more like this. They'll be talking to you.
Hey, well, there's no lag yet, so we're on the way. Let me throw you another question
Oh,
then from Christian here, because
yeah,
actually no, let me jump to famous music because it was on the same lines as what I was asking you before. Around,
yeah.
do you recommend any particular weightlifting derivatives for combat athletes, panda pulls, push presses, etc., or do you think full lifts are worth it to get the benefits?
Um, I a power clean is just so a power clean is super useful. It's not very high skill level, um, and it has all. It focuses on the things that you need for wrestling, but a full clean is better because a full clean allows you to catch under the bar quickly, and practicing that acceleration of level change is super important. And
I didn't
so
even
this
think of
is
that.
what I really so
Mm,
this is what I really like in the full clean is that you're practicing your acceleration of your level change. Same thing with the snatch. The snatch is the same way in that sense. And I really also like how the snatch is um, it opens up your chest and opens up your shoulders and strengthens your ribs, which is really important for these for wrestling because as you know, gut wrenches. The whole point of those is to kind of crank on your ribs, and so to have some exercise that can build some muscle mass around your ribs is helpful to help your body just kind of withstand the rigors of that technique.
nice. Yeah, I didn't even think
Yeah.
about the that transition of getting under the bar with the full lifts.
Hell yeah.
That's that's a good
Super
way of
important.
yeah. Um, Another question here from Christian. What grip exercises do you like and how important is grip training?
Hmm. Um, okay. I personally think grip training is very important. However, I have been very challenged in this because I know an Olympic champion, a wrestler, in the US who had like one of the lowest grip trainings or grip scores on the dynamometer,
Mm,
and he was an Olympic champion. And ever since I saw this, I realized that it was not as important as I maybe thought. And so I removed my biases. Um, but then we circle back around to what we were talking about earlier. Is like, what are our strategies to win? Like, he wasn't a wrestler that like held on to 2-on-1s, that held on to wrists, that
okay.
like used his grip to win. But if you're an athlete who depends on like your wrist ties,
Or like upper
your
body
arm
connection or
ties,
anything.
then it's going to be super important for you in that sense. Another wrestler, Alexander Alexanian, from Armenia, he's like Olympic silver medalist or two-time Olympic silver medalist, like five-time world champion or something like this. I don't know exactly how many world championships he has, but he's like a 5, 6-time European champion. His grip strength is like insane. It's like 80, 90 kilos or something like that. And so it's super important in this sense. And one of the things that's like really interesting about grip training is that it's extremely specific to the training that you
Yeah.
do. So for example, if you climb a rope, it's not going to make your squeezing strength better. If you do your pinch strength, it's not going to make your climbing strength better. If you do your lumbrical extension, it's not going to improve your pinching. And so you can kind of go down a rabbit hole of grip training because like just within your hands, you have like a whole bunch of movements. You got your ulnar your deviation, your flexion,
Yeah.
extension, deviation, all of those things, your rotation, open, close, just this is also a different muscle
Yep.
than this one, which is different than this one.
Yep. Crump
So
versus
you
clamp
have like,
versus, there's all sorts.
and so you have like, and then even with your thumb too, you have like, you have this, and this. They're all different. There's all individual muscles for everything, and they don't carry over. Um, Charles Poliquin told me that you really should just do one set of each of them just as hard as you can, and then that'll be enough, because otherwise you will spend too much time training any one quality, which might not even be that important. So it's better to kind of like, this is one of the situations where it's better to put your eggs in all the baskets and just kind of like raise them up slowly over time, as opposed to just trying to like hammer one of them, unless it's like really kind of weak and that like, dang, I can't do my gut wrench because I keep losing hold of something, or I can't hold this 2-on-1, or I can't hold this lock because I'm losing a hold there. And that's a unique situation, which is all also just about your strategy.
It's funny. I just did a solo podcast last week, and I said the exact same thing as you just said.
Yeah.
None of the grips. I mentioned all the grips you mentioned. I said none of the grips transferred to other grips, and I was like, you can spend all your time doing like the Captains of Crush grippers, and you just won't see it make much of a difference with anything else. Hello, Mia. You coming in here? Yeah, it's crazy.
I got a youngster. Aw.
Yeah. Okay. Hold on, Mia.
Hello.
Can you say hello? Aww. Can you say hello? Come, let's go. Hang on, Dad is gonna finish the podcast, okay?
Hello.
Alright, adorable. Cheers. I'm gonna throw you another question here from the one that I had on my list that's just been asked here, which I think is a really good one, is what's the difference that you've seen between high level wrestlers and Olympians?
A will to win is super important. There's just I have a lot of answers here, so I'm trying to figure out how to go about this and like kind of share this in a way that is like more interesting. Let's see. I'm gonna get down on the floor like a teenage girl. Okay. The details are super important in their training, in their preparation, and how they handle their lives. They really, professionalism is extremely important in how they hold themselves, how they carry their job, how they carry their purpose. And this allows them to have the resolve they need to compete with the resolve they need to win. And because they have their details dialed in, they don't make mistakes where people are commonly making mistakes, because all these like little things they like add up. And so like if your nutrition is like off, if your sleep is off, if your training schedule is off, it's like all these, like, even if they're like a little bit, just a little bit, all of those little things, those details add up to when you get to the competitions and have to perform. And these are and so this is one of the big things. And that carries into the preparation too. Like when they're like doing a move, are they focusing on the details that they need to be focusing on in that move, or are they just going through the motions? Are they training with a specific purpose, with the intention of getting better in specific planned ways? Is extremely important. So I would say number one is, the big thing is a strategy to win, and the willpower and means to get there. I'll tell you about what my snap system is. And so this is, you have your strategy is your S. So do you have a strategy to win? And your next is N, is the narrative. Is what are you telling yourself in order to ensure that you are going to impose this strategy? How are you going to impose this strategy? A is your actions. What are the things that you're going to do in order to ensure that you're going across this, that you're executing this strategy? What are the actions you're going to go about? And then P is your plan. How do you plan those actions? So with your snap system, you have the ability to ensure that you are finding a way to win, you have a way to win, you have the mental map of how that's going to look, you have your action and your plan. And so the big difference between high level athletes and Olympians in this sense, and even the champion, and this even goes even higher for the champions and the second place, third place, is these details. And because when you start, like, because everybody is training hard, everybody is training hard, even the people that aren't professional wrestlers, they're training hard, you know. And but the difference is that these athletes are training hard and correctly, and they're doing the things that are consistently helping them get better in the way that they need to get better. And so this is what I would say is the biggest difference between the Olympians and the high level athletes.
Are there
Of
any?
course, there's
I was gonna say, are there
yeah.
any physical qualities that you've seen maybe separate these two groups?
I have seen some freak athletes for sure. There are some freak athletes that just have like exquisite qualities. Um, but at the end of the day, it's not so much like they have the one quality that helps them win. It's
Mm,
more so, like I was talking about earlier, do they have holes in their game? Like, for example, we look at somebody like Hamid Suryan, who is there was a research study on him, about like what were his physical qualities. And like, you look at his like physical qualities, and he had his VO2 max was like 55. He had a 1.8 times body weight back squat, a 1.3 times body weight bench press. But you could see his definite advantage was he could do like 50 pull-ups. So you could see, okay, this dude's got he's strong enough to hold his own. He's got cardio good enough to ensure that he's not going to gas out, but his muscle endurance is like his weapon. And so this is where I'm talking about, where the strategy was there, where maybe he didn't even know this, but that was definitely his thing. And when you watched him wrestle, he was always like pulling on the head, pulling on the body, pulling on the head, pulling on the body, pulling on the head, pulling on the body, and then boom, he would get his high dive, and then that's how he would score his points. And then he would hit like his gut wrenches to follow from there. And those are all dependent upon having the strength in the arms, and or the lack of fatigue in the arms, to be able to hit these consecutive moves over the course of a Greco match. And he was like a two-time Olympic champion, five-time world champion. So you can't you can't say that it's not it's that he wasn't good enough.
yeah.
So so but like, generally speaking, like the physical qualities of these Olympians, athletes, they all like meet a certain minimum standard. And they meet certain minimum standards across these to ensure that they don't have holes in their game. And then their strategy to win is based upon something else.
Mm.
And that's all relative to the person. This is where we talk about the individualization of the training. Where is it important to ensure that people are creating a strategy to win?
Nice. And I have another question here, but I'm gonna come to one of mine here around the actual wrestling practices themselves. How much
Yeah.
input or say do you have into helping plan these practices? And are there changes or modifications that you like to make? Because you mentioned obviously you talked about kind of like playing with time in terms of being able to change intensity and things within training. So, are there
Yeah.
things that you're doing or liking to implement within wrestling practice to maybe get some of the adaptations or target some of the qualities that you like or want? And do you have any maybe particular examples of, I don't know, drills, games, or anything like that that maybe will kind of showcase that?
Of course, yeah. I mean, back in the U.S., when we would have our or when we have our wrestling practices, we would have our warm ups, which included drills of which included like physical qualities and exercises as part of the warm up. And so, like for example, we would do our like running, our gymnastics, and all of those things to start, and then from there we would get into like we would do our sprints, our jumps, our and other like acrobatic exercises. And I always thought that we could maybe implement even more acrobatics and plyometric drills into these. But it depends on how long you want to be in the wrestling room and train for that long. And then when
Yeah.
we would finish our wrestling practice, like it was really important uh, for athletes to um, for athletes to stay after and do pull-ups. Like we would do either 100 pull-ups a day or climb the rope a few times. And so we would do this to finish our practice. And so everyone had their individual like little shtick on how they would finish their practice. But during that time following the practice was that opportunity to address those individual things that you needed, in addition to your training. And so, I mean, especially at the in high school and college, we would have like a little bit of conditioning to finish the practice. Whether it was like some exercises or drills or something like this. But at the international level, once we finished our live wrestling, we would stretch and finish, and then practice was over. Then you had your opportunity to do your individual training once
Hmm.
practice had finished.
Do you have any input or say into the actual live wrestling itself? Maybe certain days you're manipulating the time constraint or some
Yeah,
kind of
of
constraint
course.
within it.
Yeah. So, like for example, in the general physical preparation phase, you're having a little bit more of you're trying to have a little bit longer goes, because at this time you're trying to focus a little bit more on aerobic qualities. And so this is like one of the components where you would manipulate the duration wrestling of your wrestling goes to ensure that you're training in the energy systems that you're working for.
Perfect, perfect. And I've
Yeah.
got one more for you from the chat, and hopefully I'm not running into running into the time that you have. But this one is on
Oh,
what
good.
muscles are more important for a wrestler versus a typical bodybuilder. Do more useful muscles, I'm assuming like muscles that are used often within wrestling, retain more mass when cutting?
Ooh, do more muscles retain more mass during cutting? I would say the neck is the most important muscle for wrestlers. You don't want to die, so you want to make sure your neck is pretty strong. Wrestling can be really dangerous if you don't have strong enough necks, and so having a strong neck is important. Also, if you get pinned, you lose. So if you have the strength in your neck, you can prevent yourself from losing outright. So I would say the neck is that muscle when it comes to uh,
Do you find muscles that are used often retain more mass when cutting? I'm assuming that means like back, biceps, neck, etc.
That's a really interesting question. I mean, your body will atrophy if you don't train the muscles. So that's kind of like that question essentially is like, what are the muscles you're skipping when you have your cut? Those are the ones you're going to lose. And or what modality are you using to cut your weight? Are you on the bike, or are you running? Are you doing this? Because you could potentially be losing muscle in those areas that you're using to cut your weight, because those you're at a calorie deficit. You don't have energy, and now you're asking your body to burn calories. It's going to pull it from the muscle that you're working.
Hmm.
So that's
Yeah.
one of the things that you could potentially lose muscle in those areas. For example, if you're running, you might lose them in your calves or your legs or something like that.
Yeah.
Versus you do something more like an airdyne, maybe it's your whole body. but I don't really. But
Just shrink.
I think it's, yeah. But I think it's going to be a little bit more distributed, so to speak, um, or even just yeah, or maybe it just takes it from your body fat, just because there's a little bit more of an even distribution. I don't know. It's something I
Nice.
don't know.
Final question that just came in on that topic of neck. How to train the neck effectively for wrestling?
Training the neck is a double-edged sword. You have to do some of those bridging exercises on the mat, weighted, unweighted, whatever. It's kind of like a necessary evil. It's
Yeah.
not really good for you. It's not good for you, but it's good for your wrestling. And so you got to do that. That one's really important. And then of course, like, uh, you can like look on my Instagram. There's like a somewhere in the depths. There's like my neck up routine. I have like a little lying neck up routine, which is like 100 like baby don't hurt me. Um, and I do like 100 this way, 100 this way, 100 this way, 100 this way, or excuse me, not 100. I'm sorry, 20, and it leads up to 100.
Okay.
So
I was
20
like,
this
oh,
way, 20
yeah.
this way, 20 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 this way, and then 20 bridges. And I'll do that, and it's about 100, and I'll do that. And I used to do that every other day for a long time, and that helped me with. I mean, that gets all the anterior muscles of the neck, and it's unweighted, and it burns
Mm,
like a motherfucker. So
yeah.
it's like, so that's like a good unweighted routine that I like to do, like before practice, after practice, or whatever. And then of course, like you can just get the plate and do um, your plate extensions, your plates to the side. Get your weighted stuff, and that's like one of my favorite. Uh, you only need to do a few sets of that every week. You got to be
Mm,
careful. You got to load. You got to load quick, slowly. Um, Try not to push it too hard, too quickly, because um, if you load it too hard, too quickly, you could get a stiff neck, and that's a pain in the ass.
mm.
So, or pain in the neck. So you want to make sure that you're um, improving at a slow but steady pace, and
Yeah.
try not to overdo it.
Yeah. Back in the day when this must have been my early 20s and stuff, obviously hardcore into lifting, was big listening to like Jim Wendler and stuff. I used to have a neck harness next to my bed, and I used to use it at night before going to bed, like crazy shit like that.
Before bed,
Yeah.
would you wake up with a stiff neck all the time?
No, I wouldn't do that. I was like progressively doing it, but it was all good. Do like neck harness
That's
off
interesting.
off my bed and stuff. Just man,
Yeah.
we do crazy shit when we're younger.
That's cool.
Yeah. But perfect. Morgan, where can people see your Instagram, see that next stuff, and keep up with what you're doing?
I'm on Mogo Training on Instagram. You can shoot me messages, shoot me questions on Instagram. I have been I'm trying to figure out what I'm gonna be posting on Instagram. I kind of have I have to keep what I'm doing here kind of under
Mm,
some sort of surveillance, and so I can talk to you and I can do all those sort of things, and I'm figuring out what's how I can give back to the wrestling community in a new kind of way. And but find me on Mogo Training. I got a YouTube channel with a bunch of old exercises on there too. Um,
I think we've all got one of
but
those.
right, yeah, they're kind of funny. Um, and you learn how to do a Bulgarian bag spin, and all those good exercises there. And yeah, Mogo Training on Instagram, Mogo Training on Twitter, and YouTube. And
Sweet.
of course, just hit me up. And it was a pleasure to be here, James. Thanks for
No,
having me.
I appreciate you coming on all sick and flued out and everything. And I'll link up all your stuff down in the description too, so everyone can make sure to check you out and shoot you a message and
Thanks.
whatever. But I appreciate you
Cool.
coming on,
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you had a live group of people that were involved here. That's pretty cool. It
man.
makes me feel nice.
Yeah, man. Perfect. Appreciate you guys for tuning in and asking questions. And if you're listening to this podcast, make sure you check the YouTube channel regularly because there will be live streams up for these podcasts. But cheers for coming on, Morgan.
Thank you. See you later.